Right.
Okay. Happy Independence, Ghana, Pan-African love to all our Ghanaians, brothers and sisters. And my experience of Ghana, actually, I went to a school in Nigeria, of course, high school. And for our senior trip, usually the seniors will decide where they're going to go. So some of those students, they raise money, with money, fundraising, and then they travel to maybe Italy or Turkey or wherever they want to go. But our group decided to go to Ghana. And so we went to Ghana, and one of the places we visited was the slave dungeon in Elmina, and we also visited other places too. But my experience of Ghana, that trip as a high school student, well, I was about to graduate, is that it was life altering for me, because I did not know that existed. Even though I went to this school, this high school, we were never, it was a private school too, so they never talked about African experience and of oppression, even on the continent, as it
Yeah.
relates to Africans being enslaved and being
Yeah.
taken away. So that when we visited the dungeon, it was just traumatic. We were encouraged not to take pictures, and I did not take pictures inside it. I honored that. And also Ghanaians, my experience of Ghanaians was very pleasant.
Yeah.
So it was as a result, actually, it pretty much was the launching pad for my career journey. And now I'm a Pan-Africanist, and every African to me matters.
Yeah.
And wherever there's an African person, whether in the Bahia, Brazil, or Mexico,
Yeah.
or Botswana, here in the United States,
Yeah.
they all, I see them as brothers and sisters. So thank you, Ghana, for also making an effort, to correct what has happened to our people,
Yeah.
and wishing us all Africans, wherever we are, Pan-African love, and Nkrumah never dies.
Wow.
Ashe.
Yeah. And this aspect of what you have actually said as an African visiting Ghana. Oh, I visited Ghana for the first time in 2010, and I was to spend 40 days there. And when I visited the Emina Castle too, though they took me to beach first and all the fun places, I understood uh, in a different perspective the experience of the African Americans and then the whole idea of Pan Africanism because it dawned on me that we were isolated. We were growing up with isolated experience of the plight of the black in such a way that the experience of colonialism it's a little bit stripped off from that of slavery, which is a follow-up. And then I appreciate, and learn to love and learn to accept as my brothers and sisters anyone of across the diaspora and anyone knowing that we have all had shared experience of oppression, marginalizations, and demonization. You know, I don't know, Dr. Ajadi or Mr. Ajadi, when you want to say something to your experience of visit, Winatu is here. So you just indicate with your hands up in case the thing technically mutes people. I don't know why, so that I can just unmute you. Winner, you're welcome. Hello, Winner.
Entertain the idea that Africans were weaker, because by doing that is suggesting that Africans were also inferior, so they were not able to defend themselves. But Africans did defend themselves. There are stories of Africans resisting slavery. In fact, there were we're speaking very specifically as it relates to Ghana, from my understanding, there was even a Ghanaian king, I can't remember his name, who resisted. And granted, in any a place of oppression, you find local people that are sellouts,
Yeah,
right? But at the same time, based on my understanding of that history, is that they were Ghanaian chiefs who resisted slavery. They were not just selling each other for a bag of salt, as is usually
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
cited. In fact, there was one king that was um, that was even kicked out of what is today Ghana
Yeah.
because of his resistance. I think he was sent to Sicily, so something along those lines.
Yeah.
And the family just returned about like 5 years ago or so to Ghana.
Yeah. I think
So we
that
have,
was the one with the golden stool. I think Ernest will tell us more about that today. I think
I
that was the
see.
one with the golden stool that the mother died. The king of the Ashanti, I guess. You know.
Yeah, I think probably that was him. So we have to also, we have to know our history in order to debunk some of the racist and nonsense and nonsensical claims about Africans being inferior. Africans we're nice people. We embrace other people. Even the idea of Africans being inferior, an example, in fact, of enslaved Africans who
Yeah.
defeated Europeans. So we can take that to Haiti.
Yeah.
Haiti
Yeah.
has done such an extraordinary, they defeated. So we cannot just keep, we have to provide, and we have to provide people with evidence too. But it's also not our job to keep educating people, because then we're going to sit them for the rest of our lives being
Yeah.
educated. So
I get it.
institutions
Yeah.
have to make the effort to educate people, institution on the continent and institution wherever in the world.
Yeah.
This story needs to be told so that people will make uh, a healthy decision, a healthy, um, draw a healthy conclusion of what had happened. Because as it stands, for the most part, we're just getting the European side of the story.
Yeah.
And
And
for them, is that Africans enslaved themselves. They
yeah.
sold each other for peanuts, and they are weaker, they're inferior. And this also goes back to also the idea of liberate of when it comes to my area of study, which is religion, why Africans need to be saved. So you have these missionaries who many a times are not well educated. They go to the continent trying to save Africans from themselves because they're savages. We need to show them the light.
Yeah.
So there are layers to this, and we also need to unpack them. And in order for us to do that, we also have to be willing sometimes to listen to sides of the story that may not, have been the standard.
Yeah. And there's an aspect when you were talking about the re-education of oneself. I could, like, when some people are like, oh, we know you're having a program today, Ghana Independence Day, so what concerns me with Ghana? So that's
Right.
what some people are looking at. It's not my country. And that thinking, what do you think when someone feel? Because I think is holistic understanding. Yeah, holistic understanding that can give us a true grasp. How does Ghana experience or understanding Ghana experience has something to do with you? Maybe you're in Nigeria or you're in Togolese or something like that. I'm going to mute Ajadi. I think he said I should mute him. And so I've asked you to unmute, and you can unmute. So
All right, thank you very much. It's afternoon here. I'm presently in Germany on
wow,
fellowship program with the Alexander von Humboldt
wow,
Foundation. So it's nice being in this forum for this kind of discussion. So I've been listening all along, particularly to, I'm sorry, Yokiam Dabale. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that name very well. So according to narratives that Africans are not weak, yes, I think the narrative goes in two ways, because if we say we are not weak, then there are some of our ancestors who stood their ground against colonialism, why there are so many accomplices who actually benefited from the proceed, the activities of the colonialists. So, for
yeah,
example, in Nigeria, I want to say there are history, for example, the Kurumi from Oyo, the history of Kurumi, who stood against the upturn of the traditional values has been introduced or been tried to obtain by the one of the Alaafin of for years there, but
yeah,
through the collaboration with the Alaafin of Oyo, who was supposed to die along with his first child, and trying to change that narrative that, okay, he wants to die, he is going to die truly, but he wants his child, his first child, to succeed him. But Kurumi stood against that, but the Alafi sought a collaboration with the colonialists who used their the strength of harm to kill not only Kurumi, but 7 of his children. That is the traditional narrative. Now, coming to the political aspect of colonialism, I think the area where I have problem in debunking the role played by many politicians in Africa is this self-serving quality, everybody trying to enrich themselves by taking advantage of provided by the situation there. In the case of Nigeria, Nigeria and Ghana, I believe we always have these common historical connections. I'm so sure of that. And we have these, there was a certain time in history where so many Ghanaians have to come to Nigeria for safety and all that. So I want to believe we share common history, particularly having the same colonial lords. So, but the aspect I'm coming in from here is that in the case of Nigeria, the colonialists came with three things that we call the 3 C's. They came with commerce, they came with Christianity, and they came with I think education now. Commerce, Christianity, and colonialism. But they fronted these 3 things, particularly commerce and Christianity, and many Africans bought into this introduction, and can I say we sold our souls to the colonial masters via these 3 elements. And the most important one.
To interrupt you a little bit,
okay.
Jadid, the question that comes to mind is, how does your experience in Germany actually increase the spirit of Pan-Africanism and appreciating learning more about Ghana, even when you're not a Ghanaian, and celebrating Ghana?
Yes. I mean, can you come with the question again, please?
That's you're presently in Germany, and you step out of the shore of your own country, and and then you must have been to other places too in Africa. But so like the question some people are asking, wondering why should they know about Ghana when they are not Ghanaians, or why? And then this whole idea of Pan-Africanism, how does your stepping out or being in Europe or other parts of the world increase your understanding of oneness of Africans, irrespective of the national boundaries?
Yes, I think there is a trend now that what I think is happening now is there is a kind of a decolonization of everything about Africa. For example, this afternoon I received a mail talking about the decolonization of the English dictionary, trying to incorporate African meanings of some English words into dictionaries like Oxford and Max Miller. But that is by the way. I think what we have now is we have a trend now of an attempt to decolonize African in terms of the colonial narratives that has come to drive all our aspects of operation. For example, talking about Ghana, I think Ghana is wearing a new face among other West African countries in terms of leadership prospects that the country is putting forward. And I think Ghana is, I must say, not because I'm a Nigerian, there is this toga of Nigeria being the giant of Africa, which I must say is a self-styled toga that we are putting on. Ghana, no doubt, is taking over with some of the news we hear about Ghana standing its feet and turning diplomatic decisions against even the colonial lords. For example, we had in the news recently where the Britain said the British Airways would take a dimension, and the Ghana president said no. I think this is putting Ghana in the front line of leadership in not only among West African nations, but also in the African continent. Now, coming to Germany, although the pandemic has not allowed too much mixture with everybody, but I must say that there is a community of Ghanaian, and as I said, in my room right now, I have Gari produced in Ghana. So with Ghana labeled on it, I think that for me is interesting. That for me says something about Ghana making its or our identity known across the shores of Africa. So for me, that is a very interesting aspect of a kind of decolonization of African products, decolonization of African identity, and decolonization of African knowledge, which for me is very, very applaudable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think we're going to just go straight to today's event. And we've had, for those who are joining us now, we have watched a video documentary on especially an important place in Ghana, which is the Amina Castle, which is so important for us as other Africans and even Africans in diaspora. And so we were just talking about also having a discussion about our experiences as a Pan-Africanist and our understanding. Hello? Yeah. Okay. So we're back. There was just a little technical error. And so we just go straight to the point. I think Ernest, you're welcome. So I will just run a PowerPoint slide just to welcome and to introduce Ernest, the speaker for today, so that we'll just move to this session, which is supposed to have started. I'm going to share the slide and slideshow. Okay, so today, as we know, if you want to talk, you can put up your hands and I will just unmute you. But I'm just going to make Ernest the co-host now so that we wouldn't have any issue. And also Jim Paris, co-host as a team member, and Mokele too.
Good afternoon, Ernest.
Yeah. Ernest,
nice to hear from you too.
Okay, and who is still unable to? Okay, Ernest is unmuted. Okay, Jim too is unmuted, and I think so you can just, if you're not talking, so I think everybody should be able to unmute. So I'm just changing the setting to allow people to unmute themselves. And so when you want to talk. So today we're celebrating Ghana's Independence Day, and our speaker for today is Ernest, and Ernest is a researcher and also a scholar in African studies, and he had his first degree from Kwame Nkrumah University in Ghana, and from there he moved to Oxford, where he had his MSc in African studies. and from there to University of Birmingham. So he's an alumni of our great University of Birmingham. So we're proud of him. The university is so proud of him because you can see him on virtually all the flyers. And he went to Oxford, Oxford put him on their university website. So he went to Birmingham, and then I just hope I'll get to that point that they'll put me on the website even when I've left the school too, so that my pictures, but you're an handsome man anyway. So maybe that's added to that. And so Ernest today is presently talking to us from Ghana, and he's going to speak to us about counting beyond colonialism. You can't talk about Ghana in a day. That's obvious. So he's just going to take an aspect of that. And then we hope that we're going to have more Independence Day celebration, that we're going to have more speakers coming to talk to us about Ghana, about Congo, about Rwanda, and all this. And before he moves into that, we just have a short thing with Ernest. We're going to have a short reflection with him first, and then we're going to engage with him because all of us we are here with questions on our minds, and we're not going to make it a very seriously formal thing. And as we told Ernest is quite aware that it's supposed to be a celebration. So we don't need someone to say, where is that? Can you quote the book for me? Or, and so we want it intellectual, but not strict. And you can always come in and also raise your question. And then there are some things I just want to catch Ernest unaware before he go ahead and have his presentation. So I just have some pictures here, and I just like, what comes to your mind, when you see the picture, and you just like, just tell me you're Ghanaian and the picture has something to do. So what comes to your mind? I think, so what comes to your mind when you see this, Ernest?
I think, yeah, the kind of pride that we attach to our chieftaincy institutions. Yeah. I mean, it's still a vital part of our society now. Yeah.
Okay. And so what's the word? Which word can you use for that?
Come again?
When you see in this picture. So what comes to mind? Maybe a word.
Wow. I've really been caught unaware.
Okay, that's what I prepare, just to soften the air.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, some people can type it in the chat room. What comes to your mind, and how you speak. So what comes to your mind with this?
So just two words: the African personality.
Yeah, and for those who don't actually know, can you describe this word? Who is this, and what's going on there? I can see Kwame Kuma's back.
Yeah, so actually I don't know whether the man he's hugging is a Nigerian. I don't know, but I must believe I'm tempted to believe it's one of those forums where Nkrumah is actually showing his statesmanship to other people. Yeah, but I don't know exactly who the other person is.
Yeah, it won't because it's actually scripture state, and then this actually a Ghanaian scholar who is also a UK scholar and who was known to be the first Ghanaian to have a published book in the UK. And so I'm catching you on a weird too, but also putting that. And things have been going on, and people have been discussing on social media, on various platforms, some of these pictures, and most things what comes to mind, and that's why I said in order to relax the mood of today's event, we'll just start with that, And so what comes to your mind when you see this, and what do you want to tell us about this?
Yeah, I think it's still like kind of the rich cultural heritage, which I would say is not unique to Ghana and even Africa, but I think it's something that I'm happy that people actually see the need to still celebrate these things. So yeah, it's really, and especially seeing this colorful kente and yeah. And actually for me personally, when I traveled outside Ghana, it gave me the opportunity to actually reflect on the kind of heritage we have and how to actually take some legitimate pride in them. So yeah, it's great to have such memories here. Yeah.
And that really takes us to today, which is today's Independence Day. And so this was the same day, and then we have the royalty in Ghana on that same day. And you know, when we take our mind back in time, like we were not there anyway. Some people who are here might be there. You know, maybe they were younger people, but I don't know whether we have people who are above 64 among us today. But you know, some people have shared their experience. But you know, the way we look at the picture then is it still the same way to look at the picture of Independence Day celebration? So what's the Independence Day celebration like now in Ghana? We're talking like, so can you just share that with us before we go to serious talk?
I think yeah, presently it's a bit weird. Like I don't know whether it's because of the pandemic or yeah, but I think previously Independence Day has been days where there's that kind of national unity and a time to reflect on where the country has been moving on since the time the colonial masters left our shores. Yeah, and also usually it will be a time where you'll be longing to hear from our political leaders. But then personally at the moment, I have some kind of weird relationship with the current administration, not necessarily for the partisan aspect, but I think there's a bit of disappointment on my part politically that there's a lot of gains we have made in the past 3 decades where we've had a very stable political environment. But I'm a bit disappointed that we've not really built on it to actually improve things economically. So that's where my kind of tension comes in. Yeah, but then generally, like it's one of those days that you want to hear from the president to actually take stock of where the nation is going. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I should back out now and hand over officially to you what you want to do with us today. Now the event will go. So I'm at your service. And so please go ahead and tell us how today's talk will be.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to ARN for putting this together. I mean, it's very thoughtful to have something like this running, and I'm sure this would be the only forum, probably across the world and in different places, high and low. There might be people who are taking stock of how far Ghana have come since gaining independence. Yeah, and so I'm really happy to be on this platform with people who share similar passion and concerns about the state of affairs in the various countries on the continent of Africa. And it is my hope that what I share today might resonate with some of you, even if you are not a Ghanaian or you don't have any connection whatsoever with the country. Now, I don't claim to be an education expert. So this talk will just be on my perspective and reflection as someone who has experienced the Ghanaian education system throughout basic level to the tertiary. Yeah, and so I hope some of what I say will stimulate some discussions and the questions will actually open up the opportunity to reflect deeply on this. Now, for practical purposes, I decided to video record it with the presentation, which Augustine will help me project it for us. Then shortly afterwards, you can actually have a question and discussion and we see the way forward. Yeah.
Okay, so now I go ahead, right, to that video recording, which you've actually made ahead for us. So I'm going to share, but as that I'm trying to do that, someone was asking me privately that nice Agbada, and I think the person doesn't know what I'm putting on because this was given to me by royalty in Ghana, and maybe you can tell the person the name of what this is actually. You know,
well, I think
that will be your last quiz.
That's why, yeah, great. So this is it's called smock, and in one of the local language name for it is batakari, and it's usually worn by people from the northern parts of the country. But I think for some time it's become something popular within our political setting. So we see national leaders wearing it, and in fact, Kwame Nkrumah, our first president, used to be in such attire. So Augustine probably as part of the great man of our country at this moment.
Okay, so thank you so much. And I think that helps the person. I won't mention your name. And so we go straight to the presentation. And I hope I'm sharing that, and I'm sharing that right, and I play that right away.
So the current education system in Ghana follows a 9+3+3 or 4 framework, which is a shorthand for 9 years of basic education, 3 years of secondary education, and either 3 or 4 years of tertiary education, depending on which tertiary education you are accessing. That is, whether it's a training college or
Ernest, I paused that for a while so that you can just give the context to the aspect of Ghana you want to talk about before we play the video. As the video just talk about is going to, so it's good to give a preamble to that so that people
sorry,
will,
I thought I mentioned that in the intro. So I'm just taking a stock on the education system in Ghana, and I mean it's just a slice of it. It's not the whole thing. So I'm just looking at the 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 foundations of our education system and the aspect of it that went through changes and the contributions of our first president, Kwame Nkrumah, to the education setting, then how things have been over the past few years that I have experienced it myself. Then towards the end, I actually offer some few suggestions as to how things could be made better. Then could have our questions and discussion. Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for that. And as you told us that it's going to focus on the education part of Ghana, since we can't cover everything, and that's what the video is all about. So that that gives a background context to that.
So the current education system in Ghana follows a 9+3+3 or 4 framework, which is a shorthand for 9 years of basic education, 3 years of secondary education, and either 3 or 4 years of tertiary education, depending on which tertiary education you are accessing. That is, whether it's a training college or a university setting. Presently, the current government has been rolling out a free secondary education policy for every child of school-going age. This is a policy meant to expand access to secondary schools. Much as there's been a series of developments in the curriculum at different levels, the content and approaches to teaching and examination are still tied to the missionary and colonial origins of the education system. This highlights the need to revisit some of these paradigms in order to understand what it truly means to count beyond colonialism in contemporary education. Secondary education and higher education in Ghana were modeled along the old British elite schools. This was pioneered by the missionaries as well as the colonial administration. For the missionaries, the aim was to train native Ghanaians in basic arithmetic and literacy so as to produce people who could read and understand their religious message and text. For the colonial administration, the goal of education was actually to produce subjects who could carry out the orders of the imperial powers and facilitate colonial administration. So this shaped the kind of things that were taught in the early schools. Education during this time was mainly characterized by rote learning, what is popularly known today in Ghana as chew, pour, pass, and forget. Many Africanist historians have exposed the weaknesses and problems of colonial education, not only in Ghana, but across Africa. But for the purposes of this afternoon, I'll focus on 3 of these problems. One of the major problems of the colonial education was that because these Western education systems are largely sensitive to their Euro-American context, as well as underlying notions of of white supremacy, they ignored local cues, traditions, and beliefs. Colonial education then created a wedge between what was described as traditional Africa and modern Europe. This is summarized powerfully by Valentin Mudimbe in this way. Because of the colonializing structure, dichotomizing system has emerged, and with it, a great number of current paradigmatic oppositions have developed. Traditional versus modern, oral versus written and printed, agrarian and customary communities versus urban and industrialized civilization, subsistence economies versus highly productive economies. In Africa, a great deal of attention is generally given to the evolution implied and promised by the passage from former paradigms to the latter. You couldn't have said it any better. The net effects of this problematic dynamic is captured by Paul Zeleza, an African historian, who notes that since the colonial encounter, the construction of scholarly knowledge about Africa has been internationalized, both in the sense of it being an activity involving scholars in various parts of the world and the inordinate influence of externally generated models on African scholarship. This re-echoes some of the sentiment that many of us have probably shared during our different academic experiences in our home countries and the Western world, where what counts as acceptable and standard knowledge seems to be policed and validated mostly by non-Africans. This is what many Africanist scholars have called epistemic injustice. It is telling to know that this situation is not just common in Europe and America, but it has actually been reproduced in the current education system, which is still tied to its colonial foundations. Now, as today marks the Independence Day of Ghana, it is befitting to revisit some of the contributions of a Black icon, Kwame Nkrumah, to education in Ghana, and reflect on what that means for us as we seek to move beyond colonial education. The educational deficits in the colony did not escape the gaze of the national leaders, particularly the need to Africanize, the need to address the pitfalls in the education system caused Kwame Nkrumah to take a decisive step which revolutionized knowledge production in Ghana and Africa for less than 5 years after independence. This was the decision to Africanize the education system. By this, Nkrumah sought to challenge the very philosophical foundation of education on the continent, which had long been dominated by white intellectuals. This was to be done by placing Ghanaian and, for that matter, African concerns, beliefs, interests, and problems at the center of knowledge production. For Nkrumah, this was linked to his overarching ambition to transform the country and the continent at large. A notable contribution by Nkrumah in this area was the establishment of the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. According to Nkrumah's vision, one of the most important functions of the new institute was to study the history, culture, and institutions, languages, and arts of Ghana and of Africa in new African-centered ways. In entire freedom from the propositions and presuppositions of the colonial epoch, and from the distortions of those who continue to make European studies of Africa the basis of this new assessment. Overall, the Institute was to become a site from which knowledge production in and about post-colonial Africa might be completely rethought across disciplinary lines, from research and teaching to textbooks, teacher training, and publication. In immediate independence years, Ghana was well on course to confront colonial education, where it became a center of critical and vibrant intellectual activity on Africa. People from Africa and other parts of the world flooded the Institute to study Africa in new and revolutionary ways. This was unprecedented in a world where Africa had been on the margins of knowledge production. But unfortunately, this vision to Africanize education and knowledge production was short-lived following the overthrow of Nkrumah in February 1966. Although the education system in Ghana has gone through some changes, most of the education reforms in the country after the days of Nkrumah have focused on either reducing or increasing the duration of basic and secondary education, which is still characterized by rote learning, like colonial education. Surprisingly, the current education system lacks a clear purpose and direction, given that it is still operating under the shadow of the colonial system. So what does it mean to move beyond colonial education in 21st century Ghana? And what would this look like in practice? These are huge questions, and I don't pretend that my presentation will deal with it exhaustively. But I will scratch the surface with some few questions, some few ideas, then we can have a discussion about how this might or might not work. First, we need to revisit the very idea of making education and knowledge production African-centered. This is one of the ways we can bring what we study to bear directly on the concerns and problems as well as the aspirations we have about the country. Here I speak as someone who has gone through the Ghana education system from basic to tertiary level. My experience reveals a great missing link in the current system, which is that whether you are in the natural sciences, humanities, or social sciences, much of what you learn are out of touch with the local Ghanaian realities. This is a fundamental challenge in that the system ends up producing students who normally don't see the relevance of what they study in the classroom in relation to the problems in the country. But one of the trends I've also observed is that any talk of Africanizing education tends to focus on the social sciences, but I believe that this also applies to those who work in the natural sciences, in that we can make a significant use of everyday examples around us that are as scientific as some of the textbook examples that we are used to. As argued by the late Thandika and Kandawere, this will be crucial for harnessing human resources and grounding scientific knowledge in African realities. It is the way science and technology can become part of the common sense and worldview of the wider public and underpin the scientific and technological knowledge required for the development of the continent. Also, we need to develop local curricula that is globally engaged. That the world has become interconnected is not a new phenomenon. It is rather the pace of this interconnection that is probably stunning. But the most important thing for our purpose is that Africanizing our education system does not mean it becomes globally disengaged. Instead, it means that we are trained to be sensitive to our local context, whilst finding critical and creative ways to engage the global political and economic dynamics that affect our daily lives. In fact, for many of the nationalist leaders, including Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, among others, this was their vision for an independent Africa. This has been an enduring vision for Pan-African intellectuals, but have sadly not been reflected in the local curricula that I'm used to in Ghana. Lastly, these ideas will be merely textbook observations if our students are not trained to think critically and engage the immediate and wider world around us. This is something I believe should be built strongly into our secondary and higher education curriculum. Now, with all of this, one might ask, who bears the responsibility to ensure these changes are pursued? Basically, it is a task that falls on anyone who is critically aware of the shortfalls in the education system. In the quest for independence, these fundamental changes in our societies were usually driven by the nationalist leaders who made significant contributions in the intellectual terrain. Now we are at a time where little fundamental changes are initiated by our national leaders. In the light of this, I suggest that fundamental changes in education will be brought about by vigorous social activism by civil society organizations, as well as critical intellectual activism by the many academics we have in Ghanaian universities. There are many Ghanaian-based civil society organizations who have played critical roles in impacting political and social life in the country since the 1990s. Using their advocacy skills and tools, these organizations will press home for changes in the curriculum. Over the years, our national leaders have paid lip service to educational reforms. The extent of the changes that are needed for the moment requires a nationwide policy about the direction of the education system. Although the Ghana Education Service has been talking about introducing students to problem solving and critical thinking activities, the content of the current curriculum fails to achieve that. Thus, it will be helpful for various civil society organizations to advocate for relevant and sustainable national education policies that can be implemented well by district assemblies and the teachers who interact directly with students. Finally, the teachers and lecturers who work with the curriculum need to use their intellectual capacity to fight for changes in the education system. These are key stakeholders who can work alongside civil society organizations to press home for the needed changes. But until such policies are adopted and implemented, it might be useful for academics to effect some of the fundamental changes in their respective subjects and disciplines. Perhaps forging productive alliances with academics in other countries on the continent and abroad might help to deepen conversations about how best the curriculum can be Africanized for the public good. It is my hope that forging crucial alliance among African intellectuals on the need to Africanize our various curricula might go a long way to produce students and citizens who are critically aware of our local challenges and are committed to confronting these problems effectively and creatively. Honestly, I don't know exactly how this might play out in reality, but I'll be glad to know your suggestions and questions about this. Thank you.
Yes, we're back. So thank you very much, Ernest, and for this recording, and also to avoid disruption. That's why you have actually. So I wish you can unmute yourself, right? And so we have all listened to the reflection that Ernest based on the state of education in Ghana and the way forward. And I'm so happy because I don't even know your content until last night when I got this. And I was so happy that you're actually talking about something we have been talking about as a network. And a lot of people are here. Abbas has spoken on that. Bonji Fresed has written on that. And a lot of people have been chatting to on that. And we're so happy that we are now going to have a kind of a follow-up of such kind of discussion, having Ghana as a case study. But I just want to, because I'm in a celebration mode. So I will just I'll step down before we put on that serious academic seriousness. I heard that in Ghana now, that they now wear indigenous garments as uniform, school uniform. Can you say something about that? They say they've changed the school uniform and they're now wearing African attire. I don't know which one is African attire and how does that takes place,
Yeah, I think thanks Augustine for that follow-up observation and the question. Yeah, I think on it, surprisingly, I'm not really aware of that. I don't think is really true because I've seen people in their like the typical school uniform that I'm aware of. So I don't know whether it's a development in a very localized area.
I think because you just entered Ghana back from UK. So you have not seen what is going on.
maybe I'm
or you have not seen that. And people are worried because people felt that they are decolonizing. The understanding of decolonizing is about wearing African clothes, wearing African uniform. And part of the things you're suggesting in your work is more or less a critical look at the syllabus. And you are praising what Kwame Nkrumah has done. And you feel that to a great extent, there's no continuity in the legacy of Kwame Nkrumah. That's so as not to I think other participants want to talk to that, and let's just have that because I have questions. So let me not dominate. I should moderate. So we're stepping in, and we're stepping in with questions. We have Dr. GD is here and other people, and so who is coming in? questions and remarks on the concerns that you know you can unmute yourself, so you can just come in into the conversation.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. I must say it's a wonderful presentation and a very good exploration of the educational situation in Ghana, which I must say again has a link with what is presently happening in Nigeria and if not most of the West African nations. But I actually want to talk about your proposal of social activism and intellectual activism. Now, but where I want to come in from is the area of African leaders being uncomfortable with that word activism because it always poses a kind of threat to their hegemony. So I want to ask how do we balance that? That is my first concern about activism as a way of beating the odds of education in Africa. So I want to ask, how do we beat the horde of the word activism, particularly when we know that when activism is social, African leaders don't welcome it, don't welcome that. And secondly, when we talk about intellectual activism, a government that is uncomfortable with social activism will definitely be uncomfortable with intellectual activism. So most time, the intellectuals run outside the country to seek for aids. And won't we be inviting support like we have always been doing from the colonialists who set a pace for us initially? We are trying to correct a problem by seeking external support again. So in terms of asking for aids to correct the anomaly. So I want the presenter to look into those two aspects of the query.
Okay, and I think you can just jump straight to that.
Yeah, thanks for the observation and the question. Is it Ajadi? Sorry if I've got it wrong. Yeah, I think they're very thoughtful questions. I think to begin with, the first one, I think generally, I think historically, there's been a very problematic relationship between like I think the intellectual activism and kind of political authority across Africa. So during the independence or the fight for independence, many of the nationalist leaders used their political and academic skills to actually fight the colonial authority. But then these same skills, when they were used by African intellectuals from independence, it actually ended a lot of them in jail. I think I'm sure the Nigerians will probably help me with this, how a lot of Nigerian African writers actually suffered at the hands of like, a lot of military leaders and all that. So I think it's a very tricky thing. But I believe at the moment, particularly for Ghana, there's enough room for our academics as well as people who work in the sort of civil society organization to actually use the advocacy skills to fight in that area. Because based on my previous studies, I'm aware of some of the things that civil society organizations have done to actually make impact in certain policies. So I worked surely on how civil society came as in combined their forces to actually cause some changes in the domestic violence, where actually a law had been passed in 2007, and this actually owes greatly to what civil society did in social activism. So I think that there's a problematic history with that, but I think there's been enough room for that to be used a bit more positively now and effectively. Now, on the second question, I guess probably I should have clarified what I meant by forging alliances within the continent and abroad. So when I say that, I meant the many Africans who are in the diaspora who are actually intellectuals. And I believe that there's so many Africans in the UK, in Canada, like in all over the world who are actually doing a lot. And I think one thing you said, which I share with you, is that it looks like for many Africans who are critical of the system in a positive sense, they seem to have more space to actually share those critiques when they are outside the continent rather than when they are on the continent. So I think probably, I don't know how practically this might work, but actually making sure that like there are a lot of Pan-African writers who have been talking about this over the years. Like if there could be productive alliances and networks, probably African Research Network is probably not far from this. Maybe it's early days, but hopefully it could be one of the things it does that they could be using it to do different things. And I guess it's not necessarily always doing earth-shattering changes, but it could just be writing opinion piece periodically in certain forums that could actually be publicized for people to be aware of the problems and also the proposals for it. Yeah, but I hope I'll welcome different suggestions for this because I know this is very huge.
Thank you very much for that. You know, part of one of the major things that you explained in the work is social activism as well as intellectual activism. And those are the two major solutions you have proposed. And elaborating on, if you can elaborate a little bit on intellectual activism as well as social activism, how we go about it, or we are already doing it, and how we can improve on what we are doing on a kind of on a Pan-Africanist framework.
Yeah, thanks, Augustine. So I think for intellectual activism, what I mean is for the people who work directly in the education setting, and here probably I'm targeting university lecturers who I believe they have more room to effect such changes, that they work with the curriculum, and if anything, they should be one of the first people to actually point out the discrepancies in the system. But sadly, in my experience as a student in the Ghanaian university, I actually saw that many of the lecturers that I had seemed to be comfortable with the system, but then you could see few ones who are actually doing a lot to correct some of the problems that I've highlighted. But the problem is, if you have just 1 in 10 lecturers doing this in a university, then you know this is actually something that requires a large-scale solution. So here with intellectual activism, it's more like a lecturer who knows this is a problem, who actually don't just become comfortable with it, but actually speaks up. And when there's educational reforms procedures being mooted and discussed, that they will actually propose changes that could actually make. Yeah, am I still live? Sorry. Yeah, that when there are proposals for educational reforms to be effected, that you have lecturers, teachers, and other academics who are proposing some of the things that I'm saying, because it's sad that you have some of these critical lecturers around, but then if you look at their curriculum, it leaves a lot to be desired. Yeah. But then also for social activism, for social activism, I think it's still something that is popular. I know that there are some countries where it's a dangerous thing to do. So I know that Stella Nyanzi got herself into trouble with her activism in Uganda. But then in Ghana, one of the things that has been celebrated has been the constant opening up of the political space, where much as there are still problems here, the political, I think our system actually recognizes some of these things as valid things. So I think in Ghana, I don't know about other African countries, but I think in Ghana, there's more room for civil society organization and also for individuals to actually do these things. And I know there are groups that are actually working on other things, but I'm yet to know people who work specifically to effect changes in the education system. Yeah, that's why I brought that up.
Thank you very much for that response. And I think Dr. Chavez want to come in. So please come in, Dr. Chavez.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Brother, welcome. Afishiapa, and great presentation. I wanted to share some of my, I wanted to echo some of your sentiments. I attended the University of Ghana in 1997. In 1997, 1998, an academic year. So I was there for a year or two as an exchange student. And one good thing to note is that and I've been going back and forth since that time, the Institute of African Studies is still there, and they're still producing good work. I wouldn't say revolutionary work, although a few of the professors are revolutionary or they are radical, but they're producing solid work that's going to, I think, advance the Ghanaian project and the Pan-African project forward. So that's one thing. Now, on the downside, as our brother has noted, at least when I was there as a student, the rote learning is still, is still sort of the standard way that knowledge is produced on university campuses. So the professor just sits there and just goes on and on and on, and the students takes copious notes. There's no back and forth. That's still a challenge or a problem. And then I'd also note that when I was a student there, we did, despite the challenges, there was lots of, I would say, a vibrant subgroup of Ghanaian students who were interested in Pan-Africanism, and we organized a Pan-African group there. We met every week, and we had a pretty good turnout. So there is a subset of Ghanaian students who are interested in Pan-African thought and in activism and organizing. And we did that while I was there. Lastly, I wanted to note that, in line with the images these wonderful images that you shared in these slides, a lot of the education, I think, in Ghana goes on or can go on outside of the classroom. Ghana has so many images and sites that tell the story of Pan-Africanism, of liberation, of African unity, of identity. For example, when I was, I've taken students to Ghana several times, and I've led study tours with Ghanaian students even. And so we take students, for example, to the Kwame Nkrumah Memorial Park. And I remember one student who was with us, who was Ghanaian, who looked up at an image of Fatia Nkrumah, who was Kwame Nkrumah's wife, and she's buried now at the same site. I was there for her memorial service. And the student looked up at this image of this picture of Fatia Nkrumah and said, "Why did Nkrumah marry a white?" So he thought she was a white woman, right? And so he had no idea of the history of this important effort by Kwame Nkrumah to bridge the gap between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa through marriage. It's really a profound history that we don't know much about. But the point is that even many Ghanaians don't know much about their own rich legacy as it contributes to the Pan-African history and heritage. So a lot of that can be learned just by walking around Ghana and having people who are knowledgeable about the sites, teaching local people and exchanging ideas with local people about these ideas. And there are also local folks who have lots of knowledge too, that we probably could take better advantage of. So I guess the gist of what I'm saying is that, or this part of it at least, is that yes, the school system needs to be reformed, and there's lots of work that can be done there, but a lot of it can happen or should be happening outside of the classroom. And I think Ghana has lots of potential to do exactly that, to educate people, Ghanaians and visitors, about the way forward for African people.
Thank you very much. And to great extent, I will say that Dr. Jim Paris will come in soon. I just want to make this remark as a follow-up that to great extent, I notice a kind of activism going on in some part of Africa, in which they have abandoned a school as a means of education and returned to that informal way of educating the people, reaching out to the local grassroots and in such a way that, like, for me as a person, my own knowledge of Africa, my own knowledge of myself, and my own knowledge of Ghana, when I learned that when I was when I visited Ghana, and I learned that on the streets. I learned that from the men at the Kakun Park, at the park. I learned that because they have that, they can't even quote authorities, but they have the oral history. And the Zainab, by the words, this Zainab that worked on the history of Africa, recently commissioned by UNESCO, she actually focused on the narratives from the mouth of the people, because these were things that were passed on from generation to generation. So I love your idea of activism, and I think Dr. Tim Paris, please come in. Please go ahead to add your input. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Ernest. Your presentation is very important. I think it's going straight to the core of so much that is required to ask so many questions and links that are required to think about and ask about. for reform in Africa, or at least for the continued reform in Africa. The legacy of Nkrumah and that generation of leaders is obviously a most powerful one, most important one, and I think we have to mine it, as I think you are doing it, mining it. But we have to. So with that in mind, and then interestingly, Augustine just before almost sensed what I'm now going to ask, when he was alluding to, you know, on the ground, what African knowledge or the acquisition of knowledge is in African countries. How it's extant in African countries, and is accessible, but in ways that perhaps are taken for granted. But again, returning this point about Nkrumah at the point of his leadership in Ghana and the institution of this faculty, I think the Faculty of African Studies and so on. As in your research, have you come across his precise thinking about Nkrumah's precise thinking about transforming the curriculum? Literally down to, I don't know, maybe he had some thought about, it could be anything really practical. I don't mind. In fact, maybe that's better. Is there any detail precisely in what Nkrumah meant to be, again, on the ground happening in transforming education in Ghana?
Thanks, Dr. Jem. That's really helpful observation. Yeah, I think in my readings, I think I've come across the tensions even around the establishment of the African Studies Center as to its focus. So actually, and I think probably the one of the problems about talking about this vision now is the institute was established in 1963, and Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966. So just 3 years. So it just lasted for 3 years. So it had very little time to develop. But then from the few things I read, I think even what Nkrumah did with the kind of things that were going to be taught was actually quite radical from some of the things that were proposed by some British historians who were working at the School of Oriental and African Studies. So I think, because prior to this institute, most of the things that were studied about Africa just were confined to probably language. And that was language because it was part of the things that could help anthropologists and the colonial officials to actually understand the natives in order to govern them in a way that actually helped serve their interest. But I think even with these few things that I've kind of noted, I think it kind of serves as one of the templates as to how you could actually be changing something that had actually, like, as you could be changing the curriculum. Yeah, but I think on the ground, I've not really come across exactly what it was going to look like. But I know that part of what started the process was that actually all along, Africa has not really been at the center of scholarly knowledge. It was always on the margins. So for it to be at the very center of history, politics, sociology, anthropology was pretty radical at the time. But the unfortunate thing is it didn't really get time to actually germinate and develop as to how it could have been. So it's difficult talking about that fully now.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your response. And I think I did raise something in the chat, which if you could speak to that, I would appreciate. Raise the points on that.
I think there's a very like controversial one, and because I know, and I guess there are a lot of experts' opinion on this, which I've not really spent a lot of time reading. I think at the moment, one of the problems with the English thing, I think it's not just the continuous use of English that's the problem, but I think the fact that there are a lot of local languages that seem to be divorced from scholarly knowledge, where I think that's where probably one of the, because like for English, like it's not just about changing English, but it's also about making sure that the language that we speak locally are also to the standard point where people can engage with it intellectually. And I think it's something that could be done. So currently I think there's a department, there's a local language department in the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology where I graduated, where they've actually they've had a publication where medical terms are now available in a local language of the Asante. So you can actually, yeah, and I guess these are things that should have been done long ago, so that you can read English, because at the moment, globalization means that you cannot do away with it. But the problem is where English has been made to be seen as you have to speak it to be regarded as standard and all that, at the detriment of the development of our local languages. And I think it goes back to some of the things that a lot of African philosophers have talked about, that our language seems to be just, I think it's more like we confine it to the realms of orality. And so because of that, so I think it might be difficult to just change English in a university setting, but what probably might help is to make sure that our local languages are actually being recognized and they are being standardized to the point where people can engage with this scholarly or in an intellectual sense. Yeah, I don't know what other people might suggest about this, because I've not really worked on this area, but it's a helpful observation from Ajidi. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, I would like to say that they are emphatically here that there is no way we can have a meaningful educational reform if we don't prioritize the indigenous languages in Africa, because this is the foundation of knowledge. We talked about our folk tales. We talked about being trendy scientifically and technologically. If you look at some of these advanced countries, even the colonial countries, the language they use has been pushed to the point that it gives them, it does not only give the natives of those languages the prestige, but it has enabled them to sell their products and globalize their ideas. It is very unfortunate that even as we talk here, if you're talking about educational reforms now, we'll be borrowing ideologies from the West. I think we understand what I'm trying to say here. We talk about ideology, we talk about ideological drive for most African, even in politics. We borrow democracy, we borrow everything. And like somebody just mentioned here, you know, when we talk about decolonizing knowledge, the role that language plays is very important in the sense that, for example, some of us, we know the person of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the literary giant from Ghana. He used to bear the name, I think James or something in his name. Yeah, but at a point, he had to remove that name from his name to retain Ngugi wa Thiong'o, basically. And we have another example from Nigeria, John Pepe Clark, who changed his name from John Pepe Clark to Bekederemo something to adopt his native name, because these are literary writers. These are knowledge promoters. And I would also like to refer to an example in Nigeria in the 70s, where Professor Babatunde Fafunwa embarked on a project, 6 years educational project, through which some set of students, isolated sample, were taught mathematics and all knowledges, apart from English being a subject. All knowledges were taught in the indigenous language, Yoruba language precisely. And this set of students took the same exams with other students taught in English language, and they excelled excellently in mathematics, in other subjects. So if you are talking about educational reform in Africa, and we are still operating through the scope of the English language, there is no way we will not be subservient, we will not remain subservient to the West. There is no way we will not remain underdeveloped. and there is no way African can grow, can break the shackles of colonialism. Because don't let us deceive ourselves here. You are what you are through the language you think. We all think through the language. We solve problems through the language. Problems that can be, many of African problems can be solved from inward without looking outside the continent. But because we operate through an external means of communication, we are not able to solve that problem. Now, don't let us deceive ourselves again, because when we say there's no way we can operate outside the English language, there's no way we can replace English language. Let's take, for example, how has China been able to excel so much without the English language?
Yeah.
That is a typical example for us. How has Korea been able to excel so much? How has the Japanese been able to excel so much through it is because they retain their language. Here in Germany, you have a problem of communication if you don't speak German, because that even when they understand English, you will be forced to learn German. As a fellow in Germany, you have to take a program in German before you go to your place of operation, your place of study. This is how countries prioritize their language. Language is a capital, the first capital of any country. Take that capital away, that country is empty.
Thank you so much, Ejade, for your point. And so I will just bring in Yokian. She has a point she wants to, so that we begin to take perspectives. Yokian?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. It's in fact, alongside with what others are saying about decolonizing African educational system, it goes back even in terms of my area, it's also gender and the issue. So when we discuss women issue, gender specifically as it relates to women or the relationship of women, and men. So feminism, for example, is one of the things that we covered yesterday at this group, this network. It's interesting how even so African scholars usually that want to engage the feminist, they want to be part of the feminist discussion. They usually use Western terminologies, Western ideas of what a woman is and what a man is and how the relationship. So it, as opposed to going back to African cultures within their communities to learn what really is what are people or what men and women think of themselves and how they're interacting with each other. The reason why I'm bringing this up as it relates to I'm bringing it up is because in order for us to solve whatever gender issue we have in Africa, we have to understand what is going on the African continent among our people, as opposed to looking at a man, let's say, beating a woman. You say, that's an example of oppression.
Yeah.
Okay, how about we find out, first of all, what caused this man to beat his wife so mercilessly? Because in African cultures, in some African cultures, in fact, let me take it home. In my context in Northern Nigeria, a man that beats his wife, he gets marginalized. He's told, everybody knows in town, hey, you do not mess with that man. In other words, you don't date that man. You don't go and marry him because he's been beating his wives and the women have been leaving him. And not only that, the family of those women who left him, they went to his house and dragged her out of there. So this is an example that shows us that women oppression, women being beaten is not allowed in that particular context.
Thank you.
So we cannot just go around and say, oh, African culture. So I'm just giving examples, but that's one way I think we should decolonize.
Thank you. I actually love the example you have used, and we drive the points back to Ghana because the context of the discussion is using Ghana as a case study and looking at the education sector. And for me, we can also look at the peculiarity in Ghana as a case study for discussion today. Ghana is a matriarchal society, and then we know that education, most of the education we receive, and how we know about ourselves, about other sex, and most
you
of
said
them.
Ghana is a what kind of society?
Matriarchal, a matriarchal society.
But see, can I come in? That's a problem because not every society in Ghana
is matrilineal. Let me land before you come in. Maybe I should finish my points. Knowing that our Ghana is a matriarchal society, and knowing the role that women have been playing traditionally in the education of the people, and we know that we may not be able to alter this in formal education, because the purpose of the formal education is to be able to prepare Africans to be able to serve the global needs. And that was the primary purpose, and that's still the present purpose, in such a way that we're taught at home to actually understand that this was what happened in history. So we'll be taught some things at home, but don't bring it to the classroom. And you won't go to school to study that. Nobody encouraged people to go and study African studies, or to go and study all the other things, or African languages in Africa, because they won't prepare you on how you're going to serve the purpose of the West. So that's why I'm saying let's leave the education, formal education, the way it is, and because to decolonize it to be complex, because it's still serving the same purpose. But if we go to the activism we are talking about, and we're talking about the informal way of educating the people, and I'm asking the question, what is the Ghanaian dynamics that the matriarchal society comes into play? And I think before you answer that immediately, I think the issue is boiling in the mind of Dr. Dr. Shabazz. So please let him just come in, and then we take my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just be very brief. I just wanted to note that, not every, Ghana has like 45 ethnic groups, and not all of them were centered around, not all of them were matrilineal or matriarchal. And so, but you hit it, I think you hit the problem on the problem is really, or one challenge is that in Ghana, for example, the Ewe man or woman, some of them resent speaking Tree, right? And then you have Northern Ghana, where you don't even hear Tree. You might hear Hausa. And so there's lots of tension around what language is spoken. There are the Ga people of Accra resent that Tree is spoken everywhere. And so you have that challenge. Now, to Kwame Nkrumah's credit, he was on board for this. Our forefathers said, let's make Kiswahili the language of Pan-African communication. So even today at the University of Ghana, you can learn Kiswahili. So that's a positive thing. But the challenge, I think, one challenge is that, trying to, Ghana's not a homogenous space. Nigeria's not a homogenous space. And so trying to communicate or boil it down to one or two languages that Africans will make official languages, for example, or do we say we're going to take 5 languages or 10 languages like in South Africa? So language is good, and speaking in indigenous languages is great, but the challenge will be, what about the minority groups who don't, what about their languages? How do we bring them on board? Are we marginalizing them? Are we somehow making their languages less important? And so that's a real challenge that China doesn't have, or Japan or Korea doesn't have. And so we have to, I think, and I also know one last point is that Nana Jane Apoku Ajiman, who was the last Minister of Education, was a champion of this issue of language at the lower levels. And so this is a vibrant debate going on in Ghana, but it's a tough thing to solve. I don't have an answer, but I just wanted to note that there's lots of tension around what indigenous language gets spoken and which languages get prioritized.
Yeah, and I think not before I think I'll make you reframe the question, but I think just to add a bit to the education, I think I share Ajili's concerns about the prioritizing our local languages. And I think for me, my point wasn't to just maintain the status quo, but to make sure there is like a point where our local languages could be recognized and studied as something that is intellectually worth doing. But I think back to what Shabazz was saying, I think is one of the long-standing tensions. And what he says actually has a historical dimension that before colonialism formally took place in Ghana, actually Asante Kingdom nearly conquered the whole of Ghana. And so there are a lot of ethnic groups who feel like Asante, who fear that kind of Asante supremacy in Ghana. So at the moment, I would say I'm a Fanti, but I can speak both Asante, which is the language of the Asante, which was the powerful kingdom at the time. But then the problem is, at the moment, I would say Asante is probably the easiest language to study in Ghana, the easiest local language to study. But it would be a tension to nationalize Ashanti as probably an official language. So I know it's one of the problems that probably has caused our leaders to maybe play a very lukewarm attitude towards this. And I don't know where and how that could actually be addressed, but I think Shabazz actually hit the nail that there's the underlying intention, which is making nationalizing something like this quite a tricky one. So if you could reframe your question, Augustine, then I can speak to that.
Okay, now I actually appreciate attending this event because I'm just getting to know for the first time that what we were taught is not general about Ghana, that Ghana is not a matriarchal society as a country, but there is a tribe in Ghana.
Yeah, Augustine. Yeah, so I think that one, like, so I didn't comment on it because but I think, so generally it differs across different ethnic groups. And I've not done the count, but I think there are probably a lot of tribes or ethnic groups that are matrilineal than those that are. I don't know the tally, probably I need to find out more, but I know there are groups that are matrilineal and groups that are patrilineal. Yeah.
And you feel that you agree with things, the matrilineal, because we were taught in school and we read a woman at the prime of our youth as part of the novels, because we have to read novels from various African countries in Nigeria. So we read the woman at the prime of our youth and we're made to understand that this is how Ghana operates and this is how it's different from Nigeria, which is a patriarchal society.
I think so. For instance, like I would say, no, I think so. Even I know Nigeria referred to, like you say, Nigeria, my fatherland, right? So in Ghana, generally it will be seen as Ghana, my motherland, and I don't know whether it has a link to the number of groups that are matrilineal or it's just something they came up with. Yeah, probably after this forum, I've got a lot of homework to do.
Yeah.
Now I want to let me note quickly though that there's a matrilineal and matriarchal are two different ideas. They're connected, and it's a complicated. We have to go into that later, but they're not exactly the same. Lineage is about your line of descent.
Yeah.
Matriarch is or matriarch and patriarch is about basically who's let's see whether your power is through the woman or through the male. So they're not exactly the same, but the majority of Ghanaian societies, is, if I recall correctly, are actually patrilineal. But how that relates to whether or not the male or female is dominant or not is a complicated story.
Yeah,
and there's also some debate about whether or not patrilineal societies in Ghana, for example, became patrilineal by way of Islam. So there's lots of complicated debate about what this looks like actually.
Yeah, because I know, so from what you say, I know like there are a lot of patriarchal or patrilineal societies across northern Ghana, and the religious demography, northern Ghana is generally Islam, like northern Nigeria. I don't know how that came to be. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how that works out or plays out in reality, but it's something I need to look into. Yeah. So thanks for that intervention, Shabazz.
Yeah. And Jim Paris is having his hands up. And I was just trying to make a brief retrospection from your presentation, because one of the major things that you raised for us as a network to do is this returning to the basic tenets of ideologies that were actually promulgated by the Pan-Africanists, and especially Kwame Nkrumah. And we have looked at the language perspective, and then we have looked at the whole idea of decolonizing the institution and the purpose of education, so that we'll be able to take a point. And then, so Dr. Jim Paris, please go on.
Yes, I'm addressing that now. I'm addressing Ernest and Ajadi. Because it's something that is there in our conversation, but needs to be highlighted. That this role of language is not only a question of decolonizing and in the sense of resistance. It's actually the fact that African languages contain a different way, a different contribution, different possibilities of creativity and philosophy and thinking, and these different ways actually beyond being valuable, was it the priority for African countries, are possibly valuable for the whole world. So we have this reverse double whammy of self-infliction going on when we don't take on this responsibility to maintain African languages at the fore in African countries.
Yeah, that's a remark too, and I think Ernest, you have something to buttress on that.
Come again?
You have something to expand on what?
I think I actually share with that concern. I think prioritizing, because it's something that don't get talked about often. Yeah, so I'm happy to hear that. Like, yeah, I think in my preparation I didn't really mean to focus on language, because I think it's it's a whole syllabus on its own. So I'm really happy that people have that interest there, and it's probably reviving my interest to actually take a look into that aspect. Because in my life, I'd only come across, the first time I heard about the place of language was during my time at Oxford, when a colleague of mine who is a Ghanaian were actually working on indigenous language and I think development or something. So perhaps, yeah, it's actually reviving my interest in that area. So thanks for that contribution or even observation. Yeah, I'm really grateful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so happy that the question of language even comes up during our discussion today, because it has been fundamental to most of the issues we have been raising on this network. When we discuss with scientists, computational science, scholars who are working in the area of technology, computational softwares, and all these things, they raise that concern because they have raised the concern not just in the learning, but in the products that they reach out to. And that's one of the things where we are having the webinar next week, which is going to center on the problem, of language in Africa, and then the whole idea of natural language processing technologies and tools. And I think, John, first we want to ask you that. Please go ahead on the language issue.
Yeah, that's a very interesting discussion. And I held back because I think, as you might already know, because I've said that a couple of times before, because I think it's not really for the Western European white guy to comment on that. But there's an interesting observation, which I think Jim and Ernest already pointed to, and I think Brother Shabazz too, this interesting thing that is an African problem, because Africa has this multiplicity of languages. And it is interesting that in the Western academic world, there is at least a very far-reaching agreement to use English as the scientific language. And it is, from my point of view, not really a debate within Western science to also contribute to science in another language. So in Germany, where I come from, the advice I heard many times, yes, certainly you can publish that in German if you do not want people to read it. So it is very interesting and completely disregarded within it just shows an interesting point in the self-understanding of Western science, because in Western science, and that is an interesting point for the colonization question, we have this understanding yeah, it's difficult for me to point it out because I'm just coming up with it. There's a certain understanding of the objectivity of science that makes it not necessary to put that science in that language or that language. We just need one that we all understand. And by the sheer force of the objectivity of the content of a scientific fact, it will not be altered if you say it in this language or that language. And that seems apart from the fact that I would strongly disagree with that, and that seems to be an understanding, that's an understanding that I think makes a lot of Western academics struggle so hard with the African perspective, because why would you want to put it in this or in that African language? It is in the end a scientific, thus objective fact that will not be altered. So there's no cultural loss if an African person has to express this or that opinion in African or in an English language. And that is interesting because it also shows a specific self-understanding of Western culture, which shows that it does not understand itself as one culture that is one of the many cultures on earth, but the definitive culture. If we, in the main academic Western scientific language, English, present a fact or present a scientific observation, that is it. And if you want to fully grasp what is expressed by that statement, you will have to go to the language from you will have to navigate into that language that expresses that thought. And that language in the end is, and that's the Western thing per se. That language is in the end the best language to express it. Yeah, well, and that would be then the English language. And that's an interesting thing, because probably because I am educated in the West, and I certainly believe in some of the Western scientific paradigms, that probably that is true for some shared understanding of nature, but it very, very quickly that dissolves when we turn to questions of foundational ontology or foundational epistemology. You all know for example, the basic structuring of our world on an ontological basis. If I look, it's a famous example brought by Quine. If I look onto a meadow and there's a rabbit on it, it shows deeply my ontological convictions if I say that there's rabbitness on that lawn, or there is one rabbit, or there is one the ideation of rabbit has come into factual reality. So we see there's a lot of implicit ontology. And the interesting thing is that we, within the Western scientific community, of which I am part, if I want it or not, that we have the understanding, yes, there are different options, but one of them is the true one, and all the other ones are not true. So why would we need diversity if we implicitly think, yeah, diversity is very nice and we can have a nice church afternoon where we are all diverse, but in the end, honestly, it's the one thing. And that's usually the one we came up with. And that is just what came to my mind, because I think that is foundationally wrong. As much as I personally am convicted of certain truth, and there's things that I believe, there are probably even things that I believe to be scientifically provable, but they're not. They are simply my convictions. But I have to be as open-minded enough to understand that the thing we share is probably the need to believe.
Yeah.
So the form, but it's not the material content of what we believe. It seems that human beings cannot do without it, but it seems that human beings can have a very different understanding of what to believe or what to adhere to, or, as I would like to point it, what to care about. So that would be some ideas that came to my mind.
That's a very good point, John, because looking at it from a philosophical point of view, when we look at the language problem in Africa, and Ernest can tell me if I'm correct a little bit, using Ghana as a case study. I think that Kwame Nkrumah would suggest Swahili as a Pan-African language, because I understand it, the linguistic crossing, there's a linguistic crossing in Africa. Unlike French, German, Italian, they may not cross. And most of all these European languages will not cross. But even if you talk about, we have many tribes in Nigeria, we have many tribes in Ghana, there are a lot of words, and there are concepts, and there are ideologies. So one of the things that they're talking about is, it's not like this tribe language will dominate the other. We're not talking about preservation, cultural preservation of language. We're not even talking about psychological perspective that you are thinking in one language and you are writing another language. Anybody can have that. You can be a French person, or like Bonjour is a German, if I'm correct, and is writing and speaking in English. So that's not even what we are concerned about. We are concerned about realities, ontological and things that are around us. Our songs, our understanding of the nature and the world around us, which can only be captured by words that get across. So if, for instance, an Igbo person, a particular tribe in Igbo says, water is this, Miri, another person will say is another thing which is close to Miri too, and we say Omi, or for instance, or you begin to see, like we have the Ashanti. We have the Ashanti in Ivory Coast too, if I'm correct, Ernest. So you can't realize that people are not taking a look at the invention of Africa, and then the invention of this tribalistic building, which was part of a framework that was used by the colonialists in structuring people and grouping them and creating them. And if you're thinking like that, you will not understand that people actually move. Because Yoruba that I'm speaking, I'm Yoruba. We have them in Benin Republic. We have them in the Fulani we are talking about, that they are having issues with in Nigeria. They're having issues with them presently in Ghana. So you come to see Africa is not like the way we look at it as the West, that we can say, for instance, that these are the Germans, these are the French people, these are the Italians, these are the way it's cruising is they created it, and these are intercrossing of people. And picking one language or picking two can still capture their reality. I think Ernest can speak better to this than other people can speak, because that's one of the philosophical perspective that I think has not been taken cognizance of when people try to look at the language problem and how one or two can serve others within African framework. Ernest, please, I think you want to comment on that, or anyone who has you can indicate with your hands up, or you can just comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Augustine, and everyone, and particularly Ernest for your presentation. Since I just want to
introduce yourself. Sorry, introduce yourself so that people can know.
Okay.
Who is speaking.
My name is Abbas. I am a PhD student at the University of East Anglia. I'm from Nigeria, so I'm currently in the UK, Scotland, locked down. So waiting for the restrictions to be lifted so I can return back to school. So I just want to add some thoughts to what we've been discussing. It's been very fantastic, and I think there is tension, and there are tensions regarding decolonization. And however, it's not a new project. It's been around for a while. And the trend, the decolonial trend is telling us that, yes, we actually have to get to doing the work. Because as Paulo Freire said, that verbalism without activism is lame. And at the same time, activism without reflection is oppressive. So in that regard, we have to be very, very careful, especially when it comes to the issue of language and how multi-plural we are in terms of language, especially in Nigeria, where we have about 200 languages and dialects, and trying to impose a particular language as a national language may be very difficult. So we find ourselves trying to bring forward something that is unifying and connecting, and trying to project a kind of a national cohesion. So to go back to the questions or the issues that decoloniality intends to address, scholars have theorized and are still theorizing about the fact that we have to dislodge the existing coloniality of being, coloniality of power, and coloniality of knowledge, even coloniality of nature, when you're looking at environmental injustices that have become the depredations of colonialism. And these are the issues that decoloniality seeks to address. So to me, to go back to what we've been talking about in our reflections on the fact or the question of language in science, I think the lived experience of coloniality and its impact on language and self determination, and even bodying, embodying, and even our culture is writ large. And in that regard, we have to understand that we cannot dissociate language from science or even knowledge and wisdom, as they like to put it, uh, because languages are not just cultural locations. I think they are locations where knowledge is ingrained, but also there are cultural phenomena in which people process their self-identification, I mean identity. And as colonized people, for instance, I used to see myself as someone with a triple heritage. I'm a Muslim colonized by the East, an African, and at the same time being westernized by colonization. So these are the spaces that I process my identity, and I carry these cosmologies with me, and they help me in reflecting on who I am and how I make sense of the world. So coloniality to I think coloniality of power to Mbembe, when he was writing about post-colony, was trying to make sense that the coloniality of power, it's lay claims to people that have been colonized through coercion and even violence. And if we I really want to understand the reality of ourselves as, say, people that have been colonized, or our post-colonial selves, we need to understand that we have these identities that are fluid, and that by that very nature we have to keep constantly revising who we are and how we relate with the world. So to bring it down to
Thank
the
you.
issue of education that Ernest has been talking about since, I think we have to understand, acknowledge these differences in terms of language, in terms of even within ourselves, because when if we project a say a single African worldview, we know it is not true, because African is diverse, and even education has exacerbated this plurality. So as we are thinking about the solutions, we have to be thinking about the complexities and the vitalities too, so that we won't be using the same lens that created this problem in attempting to
In
solve the
attempting to
problem.
solve.
Uh,
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you very much, Abbas, because you've just done some kind of explication. You actually buttressed a little bit on Mudimbe's point. So Betty is raising her hands up, and I think she can come in, and we also get our point of view too.
So, thank you so much. Such a fascinating conversation, gentlemen. I think from my lens as a philosopher of education, and I'm a South African trained educator, and now I'm an educator in the southern part of America. And it is very interesting, this whole idea of the ability to continue to colonize through control of culture, and specifically language. It is vitally important, certainly from a philosophical standpoint. You can't, if you can't think, if we don't have the language, we can't think what we're thinking, and we can't express what we know. And this is a way to continue to marginalize and subjugate people. And I see that happening in a very real way here in the United States. And I think that is a grave concern, as I think of the continent, of Africa, is that we have to fight to preserve language, because it is a very easy way to dominate and subjugate and create a hierarchy. And I see that happening to our children. Anywhere else in the world, learning multiple languages is a sign of prestige, of intelligence, of sophistication. In the United States, we take children into the schools and then demand that they only learn one language. And we refuse to speak that language. We refuse to be able to communicate with their home, and we create these, we split people between their school culture and their home culture, and we continue to perpetuate these cultural hierarchies, and where students can have to transcend culture literally from leaving the classroom and entering their home, and that continues to split people within themselves. And that is the trick of, I feel, recolonizing, and to make people ashamed and continually agonizing over who they are. And language is a powerful way to do that to our youngest children, and especially when they are brown and black. And then we particularly decide their languages are not to be taught and not to be seen in our classroom spaces. So certainly from an educator's point of view, we have to continue to champion this from the smallest to the oldest, for the sake of their families, their cultures, so that they cannot be colonized, and so that finally they can be able to express themselves in a philosophical sense using the intricacies of their own mother tongue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's wonderful, because thanks so much, Vete. And it's so wonderful because I was at the launching of the book that they had also, and I see the perspective that you come in with the education part of it. And it's so important that we have allies, we have people who actually, and it's something very interesting. And maybe we'll be able to hear more from you on that when we have other sections on education. And we're coming to the end of the program, and we just, if we don't have urgent consent that anyone has, because we're going to just take a look at what really happened just for 5 minutes, watch a small video clip of what really happened during during the Independence Day itself, and E.T. Mensah's song, along with with our brother, our big brother, Kwame Nkrumah, coming in, and his actions at that time. So I'll play the video, and then the speaker, we have some minutes to round up, and then we thank everyone for your participation. If there is, you don't have anything so much on your mind that you really want to say. So for that sake, now I can share that.
The United States of Africa.
The people of the Gold Coast had had their own assembly under the British, but not independence. In 1957, they became the first black Africans to get complete freedom. Leaders from East and West came to Accra to see the handover. Vice President Nixon represented the United States. He arrived with a delegation that included civil rights leader Martin Luther King.
A new order is coming into being, and an old order is passing away. It seems to me that this is fit testimony to the fact that eventually the forces of justice triumph in the universe, and somehow the universe itself is on the side of freedom and justice.
The British were proud of the peaceful nature of the transfer.
For Dr. Nkrumah, main architect of Ghana's independence, this is a day of fulfillment. The longing to be free, the need to be free, these are part of the rightful heritage of man, a heritage denied to colonial Africa until now.
The Gold Coast was renamed Ghana, with a parliamentary system modelled on Westminster. Committing themselves to civil rights, the new government put up a huge commemorative arch.
Here, but a handful of years ago, men laid down their lives for a cause that was not yet won. for freedom, for justice.
Komla Bedema had been with Nkrumah from the start. Now he shared the glory.
And in the subdued light, we mounted the platform and were all ready when the lights all went on at 5 minutes to 12. With me standing on the right hand side of Nkrumah, everybody was happy. The cheering probably is still resounding, but we don't hear it.
At long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. From now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. I want you all, those who have hats on, to take off your hats and let the band play our national anthem. And from now on, that national anthem is the national anthem of the Gogo to be played on all occasions.
The song of the night was called Freedom Highlife, written by E.T. Mensah, the king of African highlife music.
Ghana, land of freedom, toils of the brave and the sweat of the labor, toils of the brave which have brought results, toils of the brave and the sweat of the labor, toils of the brave which have brought results.
It's very great that day at the Independence Square. People are dancing, singing. They love the music and the song.
The song really symbolizes the saying of Nkrumah, at long last, the battle is ended.
Because we have freedom. We have our freedom.
Ghana, we now have freedom. Ghana.
Already being hailed as the father of African nationalism, Nkrumah gave funds to other nationalist movements and preached the message across the continent.
This mid-20th century is Africa's. This decade is the decade of African independence. Forward then to independence. To independence now. Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
Wow, that was interesting, and it's actually a very serious clip. Let me stop that because there were lots of documentaries around that, which we can always access via YouTube, and you can deepen your knowledge on that. And one of the major things that we pick from our own review of some of this video was to find out that the spirit, the tempo in which they were, was different tempo, the level at which they operated. And it's so painful that part of their struggle, they were victimized, especially most of those who are at the forefront. So we don't know those who are currently working towards the colonization. Don't ever be worried if you're victimized or if a lot of things involved. We are all together, and then we shall achieve this. In line with this, before we end the session, and our speaker just give the last word, we're going to have Zimbabwe next month on the 18th of April. And we're going to have, as usual, a Zimbabwe scholar and an indigenous who has all the facts and the experience. And then the title is Zimbabwe at in the Zimbabwe in the spirit of Pan-Africanism. So we are taking off from Kwame Nkrumah, because one of the major things that our speaker made us to realize about Kwame Nkrumah's struggle was he opened door also for other African issues. And he wasn't seen, even when he was sent on exile, due to the conflict that was created within the system in Ghana then, and all the incidents. They didn't know that he was welcome like another president or like another king in another African country. And that's what we should be as African and Pan-Africans, and as well as our allies who are Africans by the orientation and by the advocacy that they also promote. So at this point, I hand over the mic to Ernest, the virtual mic. And then if you have some reflection, you can always continue in the chat room, and then we edit this video, and then we can be able to share. So please, Ernest, I'll take over the floor for your last words, and I give over.
Thanks, Augustine, for handing over the virtual mic. I'm hoping I'm holding it well. I think I've been really pleased with. I think my aim has actually been achieved, because one of my major goals was to stimulate some thoughtful discussions on this particular thing, and I thank all of you for the contributions, suggestions, questions, feedback. It's really helpful, and I'm hoping that in the days, weeks, and years to come, I'll be reflecting on them, and it will actually help me probably chart a different research agenda or something. But also one thing is actually there's been moments where I've been greatly discouraged by the kind of thing that I see in my everyday Ghanaian reality. And when I think of where the country came from, the struggles of our forebears, and how things sometimes have been unfolding in our present moment. But I think watching this short clip and hearing some of the things that people are sharing, kind of reviving my interest in Africa. And I think I remember what Kwame Nkrumah said on the night of independence, that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it was linked to the total liberation of Africa. So I'm happy that there's such a forum, the Africa Research Network, where people, both Africans and non-Africans, share a great interest in the continent of Africa. So I hope I will continually be part of this team, and that I'll keep getting more ideas from people like you, and that together we'll be impacting one another in the kind of intellectual stuff that we all do. So I'm happy to share this 64th Independence Day celebration with you all, and I hope our path cross again another time. I'm really grateful.
Thank you very much, our brother, Ernest. And what's your Ghanaian name, so that we decolonize your name, and then that will be your Independence Day.
So usually both my some of my friends in the UK, they chose to call me that. So I'm called Kwofie.
Okay.
Let me spell it so that it's probably better.
Okay, and that's lovely. I've sent my number into the chat for those who are not on our WhatsApp group, so that you can just send me a message with your WhatsApp number, and I can have you. You can have updates of what we are doing and our conversation. And most of what we are doing, we don't just have the conversation, we have the units, the committee that are in charge of the scripting and trying to see how to form teams out of basic points raised for publication and also for joint work. So keep your paper intact. And on behalf of the network, on behalf of the team, on behalf of all the members and people who have made today possible, a lot of people now rely on recording because we don't have equal time and equal agenda, equal routine. So they rely so much on the recordings that we have, and we thank we're so happy for that. So we thank those who are present, who are here, because if everyone relies on recording, what's going to happen? And then we thank the faces we are seeing for the first time, and also we want to continue to have you as part of us, and we're all working together. The network, most of the faces you are seeing here people pushing the network, making things happen, suggesting speakers, and the most importantly, everyone, irrespective of their race, tribe, and we have a link, we have a website, we have all the details, which you can also check. So thank you very much, and then hope to see you later. See you next week as we please meet our scholars and have a great day. You can pump champagne wherever you are. It's still Ghana Day celebration, and the music goes on. Bye.
Bye.